Welcome to Happy Aura, a calm space in a loud world. Slow down, breathe deep, and enjoy wisdom. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter. For always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. The words read like a quiet warning. The kind you don't hear shouted from a mountaintop, but whispered over tea by someone who has lived long enough to see how people exhaust themselves in an endless race against each other. At first glance, it feels like common sense. Of course, there will always be people above or below you in skill, status, beauty, or wealth. But the real weight of this truth doesn't hit until you've spent years running on that treadmill of measurement. This is not just a matter of philosophy. Comparison is built into our psychology. Humans are social animals, and our brains are wired to scan the social environment for where we stand in the hierarchy. In our evolutionary past, this skill could mean the difference between survival and exclusion from the tribe. In the modern world, however, the same instinct often corrodes our happiness. From childhood, we are subtly trained to measure ourselves against others. In school, grades are public. Awards are handed to the best students. Sports teams crown MVPs. Families sometimes compare siblings. Even our earliest attempts at art are often judged not for personal joy, but for how they stack up to someone else's work. This conditioning teaches us a dangerous formula. Worth equals my performance compared to other people's performance. If you're ahead, you might feel pride, maybe even superiority. If you're behind, you might feel shame, envy, or inadequacy. And so, without realizing it, we link our sense of self to a scoreboard that never stops moving. The title warns about two emotional byproducts of comparison: vanity and bitterness. Vanity happens when you measure yourself against someone less skilled, less wealthy, or less fortunate, and conclude that you're better. It feels good at first, but it's a fragile satisfaction, dependent on others staying beneath you. Vanity can quietly rot humility and empathy, isolating you from genuine connection. Bitterness comes from looking upward at those with more money, more success, more beauty, more love. If you believe life is a competition for limited resources, their gain feels like your loss. Over time, bitterness calcifies into resentment, poisoning not only your relationship with others, but also your relationship with yourself. The irony is that you can bounce between vanity and bitterness in a single day, feeling superior in one situation, then utterly inferior in another. This is the emotional roller coaster of constant comparison. The metaphor of greater and lesser people makes it sound like life is a vertical ladder. But in reality, the ladder is an illusion. Someone may outrank you in income, but struggle with crippling loneliness. Another person might have physical beauty, but carry deep trauma. That colleague you envy for their confidence might secretly admire your creativity. We don't see the whole picture of other people's lives, yet we judge ourselves against fragments. In truth, human worth is multidimensional. Comparing yourself on one axis, wealth, skill, looks, ignores the infinite other axes where value can live. Comparison is not new, but technology has supercharged it. Social media turns life into a permanent talent show, with everyone displaying highlight reels and few showing the backstage mess. The problem is, our brains don't naturally discount the curation. We react to these snapshots as though they're the full truth. It's like comparing your behind-the-scenes footage to someone else's movie trailer. No wonder so many of us feel like we're losing at life. One way to step off the ladder is to reframe life from competition to contribution. Instead of asking, "Am I better than them?" ask, "What value can I bring?" This shifts the metric from relative superiority to absolute usefulness. Contribution is independent of hierarchy. You don't have to be the best to be meaningful. A school teacher who inspires a child to love reading, a friend who listens without judgment, a neighbor who shares a meal. None of these roles require winning a contest, but they are deeply valuable. The most sustainable comparison is with your past self. Instead of, "Am I more successful than they are?" ask, "Am I wiser, kinder, stronger, or more skillful than I was a year ago?" When you compare yourself to your past self, you're playing a game you can actually win. Progress, even small, becomes fuel instead of frustration. Imagine walking into a library. On the shelves are biographies of every person on Earth. You pull down the greatest achievers, scientists, artists, leaders, and feel small in their shadow. But then you wander into another aisle and see books about people who never became famous, yet lived lives of quiet dignity, kindness, or creativity. Which shelf matters more? The truth is, both matter, and neither is a full measure of a person's worth. Perspective comes from seeing the whole library, not just the section society praises most. It's possible to recognize someone else's greatness without erasing your own value. Humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less often in the context of constant measurement. You can admire without envy and accept without self-deprecation. This mindset allows genuine learning. If someone is more skilled than you, they become a teacher, not a threat. If someone is less skilled, you can encourage them without condescension. To resist the waves of vanity and bitterness, you need an anchor, a sense of self-worth that's independent of others' positions. This might come from values, defining what matters to you beyond external approval. Craft, taking joy in improving a skill for its own sake. Service, directing energy toward helping others. Spirituality, rooting identity in something larger than human rankings. The anchor keeps you steady, whether others rise or fall. Other people can reflect parts of ourselves we didn't see, strengths, weaknesses, blind spots, but they're mirrors, not rulers. If you treat them as rulers, you'll always be too short or too tall. If you treat them as mirrors, you can use the reflection for growth without letting it dictate your worth. Some fear that if they stop comparing, they'll lose motivation. But real growth doesn't require insecurity as fuel. In fact, self-acceptance creates a stable platform for improvement. Think of a plant. It doesn't grow because it hates its current height. It grows because it's nourished, rooted, and naturally inclined towards sunlight. Two violinists, Anna and Livia, graduate from the same conservatory. Anna constantly checks competition results, social media likes, and critic reviews. When she wins, she feels powerful. When she loses, she doubts her talent. Livia still notices others' success, but her primary focus is the music itself. She measures progress by how much better she plays compared to last month, how deeply she connects to her audience, and whether she still feels joy in the craft. 5 years later, Anna has quit. The stress was too much. Livia still plays, sometimes in grand halls, sometimes in small community events, but always with fulfillment. The difference: Livia learned early that comparison was a thief of peace, and she chose to measure her life differently. Write down 3 things you appreciate about your own life, unrelated to anyone else's position. Instead of only looking up to people above you, identify qualities in those with less that you admire: resilience, kindness, patience. Limit exposure to curated feeds. Replace some scrolling time with activities that immerse you in your own life rather than others' lives. Track metrics that matter only to you: books read, workouts completed, moments of kindness shown, skills practiced. We cannot escape the fact that others will surpass us in certain ways, and we will surpass others in different ways. This is not injustice, it is diversity. The danger lies not in the truth itself, but in how we interpret it. When we see greater as a threat and lesser as a prop, we fall into vanity or bitterness. When we see greater as inspiration and lesser as an opportunity to lift others, we step into a healthier cycle. Imagine waking up tomorrow without the impulse to compare. You see someone's success and feel happy for them without doubting yourself. You notice someone struggling and help them without feeling superior. Your energy goes into creating, learning, and connecting, not keeping score. That is the freedom this old wisdom offers. It doesn't deny differences in ability, beauty, or status. It simply releases their power to dictate your self-worth. There will always be people greater and lesser than you. But life is not a vertical contest. It's a vast landscape where each person walks a different path. Measure your worth not by where you stand in someone else's story, but by how fully you live your own. When you stop comparing, you don't become complacent, you become free. Free to grow without fear, to connect without ego, and to live without the exhausting burden of proving yourself against everyone else. Because in the end, the only race worth running is the one that leads you closer to the person you were meant to be.